Watch it, old man. The words sliced through the humid afternoon like a knife, followed by the sharp crack of sneakers scraping against concrete as one of the teenagers shoved deliberately into Arthur Green, sending him lurching off the curb and into the unforgiving chaos of the street. Tires screeched, horns blared. A delivery truck swerved with a terrifying groan, narrowly missing the old man by inches. Arthur staggered, heart pounding, not from fear but from a sudden white-hot blaze of fury ignited in the deepest recesses of his chest. He righted himself with effort, one hand clutching the air where his cane had slipped from his grip, the other reaching instinctively for balance that his knees no longer promised. Time seemed to slow. The echo of teenage laughter rang through the block, cruel and high-pitched, a jarring counterpoint to the threat of death he'd just sidestepped. "Did you see him jump?" One of them howled with glee. "Bet he hasn't moved that fast since Pearl Harbor." They high-fived one another, the sound sharp and smug, like slaps across the face of decency. Arthur stood, chest heaving as the laughter faded, his cane retrieved by a kind bystander, a woman in her 40s with a floral shopping bag and eyes full of alarm. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked gently, helping him to the curb. "Those dreadful boys." Arthur nodded stiffly, the pain in his hip blooming like fire now that the adrenaline was fading. "I'm all right, ma'am, shaken more than anything, but thank you." His voice, though raspy with age, was steady, deceptively calm. A quiet storm was building behind it. She fussed for another moment before letting him go. He thanked her again, gave a faint smile to reassure her, and began limping toward his original destination, the bakery at the corner of Elman and 3rd, where every Saturday he treated himself to one single eclair and a paper to read on the park bench. But now, the thought of that eclair soured on his tongue. Their laughter still clung to the inside of his skull. That look of utter disregard, of mockery, had cut deeper than the fall could have. He'd fought enemies with bayonets in Korea, who had looked him in the eye with more decency than those boys. Arthur Green was 90 years old. He had worn the uniform of the United States Marine Corps for over 3 decades. Enlisted at 17, he'd lied about his age, fought in the Pacific during World War II, in the freezing horror of Korea and in the jungle nightmare of Vietnam. He'd bled, lost brothers, stared down death more times than he could count, and returned with medals he never wore and stories he seldom told. Now, in the city he had helped protect, he was nothing more than a figure of mockery to boys who didn't know the difference between TikTok and a bayonet charge. Boys who had never earned the right to laugh in the presence of someone who had borne the burden of service. He didn't need revenge. He didn't want to call the police. What would that do? A report, a shrug, maybe a citation, a slap on the wrist. What he needed, what they needed, was a lesson. He glanced down the alleyway into which the boys had vanished, a shortcut to a forgotten corner behind the derelict packing plant. He knew that alley, knew the cul-de-sac of graffiti-tagged brick and broken bottles. Trouble liked to nest there, but he also knew something else. 2 blocks down, the Marine Corps recruiting station sat in a squat, red brick building like a silent watchtower. He drew out his phone, not a sleek device, but a thick old flip model he barely used, and thumbed through the contact numbers. No Gunny Miller listed, but he did have the station's main number. He pressed call. Marine Corps recruiting, Sergeant Peterson speaking. Arthur's voice dropped into the cadence that had once commanded battlefields. "Sergeant, this is Master Gunnery Sergeant Arthur Green, retired." The line went still for a breath. "Sir, yes sir, what can I do for you?" "I need to speak with Gunnery Sergeant Miller, immediately. This is regarding an incident involving disrespect shown to the Corps and an assault." Another pause. Then, "Connecting you now, sir." Arthur's fingers held the phone steady, but his breathing slowed. Not with age, not with fatigue, but with clarity. It wasn't about ego, it wasn't about pride. It was about a code etched in blood, in brotherhood, in the faces of the men who never came home. You did not dishonor the Corps, and you did not lay a hand on one of its own, not without consequence. The line clicked. Miller. Gunny, it's Arthur Green. Silence. Then a shift in tone. Master Gunny Green, sir, what's the situation? Arthur relayed the details. Calm, direct. He spared no detail, no embellishment. The bench, the shove, the traffic, the laughter. The alley. Then he stopped. They disgraced the uniform, Gunny, he said softly, and endangered one of its own, for amusement. Gunny Miller was silent for a heartbeat, then another. Sir, are you hurt? Bruised, but functional. Copy that. 4 or 5 teenagers, dead-end alley behind the packing plant. Understood. Arthur knew that tone. It was the tone of a man who had just accepted a mission. Do not engage further, sir, Gunny added. Stay clear, we'll handle it, Marine Corps style. The call ended. Arthur sat down on a nearby bench, one with a full view of the alley entrance. The bakery forgotten. The pain in his hip ignored, his pulse steady. He didn't smile, not yet. The quiet was broken less than 10 minutes later by the arrival of 8 figures. They didn't run. They didn't shout. But they moved with lethal precision. Some in dress uniforms, crisp, tailored, polished shoes glinting in the afternoon sun. Others in combat utilities, sleeves rolled sharp, boots pounding like war drums. Gunny Miller led them, mid-30s, chiseled jaw, eyes like iron under his campaign cover. Behind him, 2 seasoned recruiters and 5 poolies, young men not yet. Marines but eager to prove themselves. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. They moved as one, like a tide. At the mouth of the alley, Miller held up a fist. 2 Marines flanked the sides of the entrance, back straight, blocking any exit. The others entered the narrow concrete corridor without a word. The laughter inside stopped like a switch had been flipped. Silence fell, thick and sudden. Arthur leaned forward slightly on the bench. His cane rested across his lap. His hands folded. He didn't need to hear the words to understand what was being said. Gunny Miller didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. But his tone would have dropped the temperature of the sun, the sharp bark of a question, the flat declaration of identity. United States Marine Corps. The ice-hard list of offenses. Another voice joined his. Then another. Controlled, stern, emotionless as a gavel. There was no shouting, no violence. Only the slow, surgical dismantling of arrogance. Brick by brick, then movement. The boys emerged, one by one, their eyes were wide, faces drained of color, shoulders sagging, swagger gone. One stumbled. Another looked over his shoulder as if afraid to look away from the alley. They moved like sheep who had narrowly escaped a wolf pack. Arthur didn't rise, didn't speak, only watched them go. They didn't look at him, couldn't. The last of them, baseball cap boy, hesitated at the alley mouth, and for a split second, Arthur thought he might say something. But the boy dropped his gaze and hurried after the others. Then, Gunny Miller stepped into the sunlight. He approached the bench and snapped to attention, delivering a crisp salute. The young Marines behind him stood at parade rest, silent, stone-faced. Master Gunnery Sergeant Green, sir, Miller said, voice now formal but softer. The situation has been addressed. The individuals in question have been thoroughly briefed on the values of the Corps, with particular emphasis on honor, courage, and commitment. Arthur stood slowly. He returned the salute with quiet dignity. Thank you, Gunny, and thank your Marines. No thanks needed, Master Gunny, Miller replied. We take care of our own. His eyes searched Arthur's for a moment. Are you certain you don't need a ride? Medical? I'm all right. You and your men have done more than enough. The Gunny nodded. Then, with your permission, we'll return to the station. Arthur inclined his head. Fall in, Miller barked. The Marines turned in perfect unison and marched down the street. Pedestrians watched from a distance. No one said a word. Arthur remained at the bench, breath easing. The ache in his hips still throbbed, but in his chest, where the cold had settled earlier, a quiet warmth now grew. Not justice, not vengeance. Something older, something earned, respect. For the first time that day he smiled. He would get that eclair after all. The bakery door chimed as Arthur stepped inside. the scent of vanilla cream and warm pastry wrapped around him like an old friend. Behind the counter, Rosa, a middle-aged woman with curly black hair and a familiar pink apron, looked up and smiled. "Mr. Green, right on time." Then her smile faded. "Are you all right?" Arthur brushed the dust from his coat and nodded. "Had a bit of a stumble, but I'm still kicking." Rosa narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced, but she didn't push. Instead, she slid the eclair box across the counter, wrapped with the same blue ribbon she used every Saturday. "It's on the house today," she said quietly. "Some people saw what happened out front. Those boys." "They've been spoken to," Arthur said, his voice like gravel polished by time. "Thoroughly." Rosa's eyebrows arched, but she didn't ask. She nodded, as if sensing that whatever had transpired wasn't hers to know, but justice had somehow been served. Arthur gave her a quiet nod of thanks, collected his pastry and a folded newspaper, and made his way slowly back to the park. It was early evening now. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows from the trees onto the gravel paths. He sat down on his favorite bench under the great elm tree, its bark gnarled with age, like his own hands. For a while he simply sat, watching squirrels dart among, fallen leaves and joggers pass with earbuds in and eyes glazed. Across from him, a young father tried to teach his daughter how to ride a bike. She fell. He rushed to her, scooped her up, kissed her scraped knee, and sent her off again. Arthur smiled faintly. He unwrapped the eclair, took a slow bite, and wiped his mouth with a handkerchief older than most cars on the road. Then he opened the newspaper. Page 1, local politics. Page 2, a funding crisis at the high school. Page 3. He stopped. There, in the local briefs column, was a photo, not of him, but of the alley. The caption read, "Marines visit local hotspot after assault on veteran. Community commends silent display of strength." No names, no quotes. Just a short, dry paragraph, but enough. Enough to send a whisper through the city. Something had happened. Arthur folded the paper and set it aside. Just then, a familiar voice called out, "Sir? Sir, excuse me." He looked up. The boy from earlier, the one with the baseball cap. But this time the cap was gone. He held it in both hands, twisting it nervously. His friends were nowhere in sight. Arthur said nothing. The boy stepped forward, clearing his throat. I wanted to say I'm sorry for earlier. We didn't know. We were just messing around, but it was wrong. I know that now." Arthur studied him carefully. The boy's face had lost its smug edge. His hands trembled slightly. "Your name?" Arthur asked. "Jordan. Jordan Blake." "How old are you, Jordan?" 17, sir." Arthur nodded slowly. 17, he repeated, like weighing the word. Jordan shifted his feet. "Those Marines, they talked to us, not yelled, not like teachers do. Just talked, told us who you were, what you'd done. They made us watch. A video, Fallujah, Vietnam footage. I didn't even know half that stuff happened." His voice cracked. "They said you were a master gunnery sergeant. You were a sniper?" Arthur exhaled through his nose. "Among other things." Jordan looked down. "I never thought about what people like you gave up. I didn't think you were real, honestly. People say hero, but it's just a word. Then I saw your name on that plaque outside the recruiting office. You were there when they put it up?" "I was still active duty," Arthur said quietly, 50 years ago. Jordan looked like he'd been punched. "I'm sorry, I really am." Arthur gestured to the bench beside him. "Sit." The boy hesitated, then obeyed. They sat in silence for a while, the breeze rustling the trees overhead. "Jordan," Arthur said finally, "do you know what Semper Fidelis means?" Jordan nodded, always faithful. Arthur turned to him. "Do you know what it feels like?" Jordan blinked. "No, sir." "It feels like crawling through mud with a broken leg because the man next to you might not make it without you. It feels like burying friends and still getting up the next day. It feels like being spit on when you come home and keeping your head high because you didn't serve for applause. You served because it was right. Jordan swallowed hard. Arthur continued, his voice softer now. It also means protecting people who don't know they need protecting, even ones who shove you into traffic. Jordan's eyes filled with tears. He nodded, but couldn't speak. Arthur stood slowly, joints creaking. What you do with today, Jordan, will matter. Not to me, but to who you become. Jordan rose too. I want to join. The Corps. When I'm old enough. Arthur looked him over. Then start by earning the right to say that. Begin with respect, self-control, honor, earn your place. Jordan straightened his spine. Yes, sir. Arthur turned, cane tapping gently against the path as he walked away. Jordan stood there a moment longer, then looked up to the sky as if the world had suddenly grown larger. That night, word of what had happened spread further, not in headlines, not in gossip, but in the way truth travels when it matters. The bakery owner told her sister. The sister told the pastor. The pastor told his Sunday school students. And slowly reverence bloomed in places that had forgotten what it meant to revere. 2 days later, Arthur received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a simple note. Master Gunnery Sergeant Green, I've dropped out of the dumb stuff. Told my friends they're welcome to join me or be left behind. I've signed up for the local youth program at the recruiting station. They're going to teach me discipline. I will earn it. Jordan Blake. Arthur folded the letter, placed it beside the others he'd kept for decades. From war buddies, commanding officers, even a few apologies scrawled in combat zones. Then, he sat by his window, looked out at the flag fluttering gently on the porch and exhaled. Not with anger, not with grief, with peace. The next weekend, when he arrived at the bakery, Rosa greeted him with something new. A framed photo hung near the register. It was the park bench, empty, but in the background, the alley, and just at the edge, a single Marine standing guard. Below it, a plaque. For those who stand long after they are done fighting. Arthur smiled. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. And somewhere, far beyond memory and medals, the Corps smiled back. In memory of Arthur Green, Master Gunnery Sergeant, USMC 1934-2025. He never asked respect, but he earned it. That bench never sat empty for long again. 3 months later, the leaves had begun to turn. Crisp reds and burnt oranges carpeted the park paths, where Arthur Green once sat every morning with his eclair and folded newspaper. But today, his bench was empty. Rosa stood behind the bakery counter, nervously adjusting her apron. The line was shorter than usual. Most of the town had already made their way to Memorial Hill, a quiet green slope near the old war monument. She turned the sign to closed and stepped out, a small white box in her hands, tied with a blue ribbon. At the hilltop, a crowd had gathered. Hundreds, some in uniforms, past and present, others in simple coats and scarves. Jordan Blake stood. Near the front, his once boyish face hardened with purpose, now wearing a junior ROTC pin and polished black shoes. His cap was pressed to his chest. At the base of the granite memorial, a polished wooden casket rested between 2 flags. The chaplain cleared his throat. We are gathered today not in mourning but in reverence. Master Gunnery Sergeant Arthur Green passed peacefully in his sleep 3 nights ago. No fanfare, no complaints. Just as he lived, quietly and with deep dignity. A hush fell over the crowd. The chaplain continued. He fought in 2 wars, trained hundreds of Marines, saved countless lives, and never once asked for thanks. But today, Ridgemont thanks him. Then came the unmistakable command. Detail. Attention. 7 uniformed Marines raised their rifles. Ready, aim, fire. The first volley shattered the silence. Fire. The second echoed off the hills. Fire! The third left many in tears. Taps began to play, solemn and haunting. A lone bugler stood beneath the elm tree where Arthur once sat, his notes floating over the wind like a whisper from another world. When it ended, Rosa stepped forward, placing the box gently atop the casket. Then she leaned close, whispering, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Still warm, Sergeant, your usual." She stepped back, wiping her eyes. Jordan walked up next. He held a small object in his hand, a weathered Marine Corps challenge coin Arthur had once shown him, engraved with the words, honor, courage, commitment. He placed it carefully on the casket. "I ship out next summer," he said softly. "I'll make you proud." He saluted. But just as the service seemed over, a low rumble echoed in the distance. At first it was thought to be thunder. Then it grew. All eyes turned skyward. 3 helicopters appeared on the horizon in tight formation, 2 gray Sea Knights flanking a black UH-60 Blackhawk. As they approached, the lead helicopter dipped its nose. A flyover. Rosa gasped. They came. Inside the Blackhawk, a young Marine sat at the open door, holding a flag. On his vest, a patch that read 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, Semper Fidelis. He gave a crisp salute as they passed. The town stood in stunned silence. Later, when the sun dipped low and the last guests had gone, one figure remained at the hilltop, an old friend from long ago dressed in full-dress blues despite the stiffness in his joints. He knelt slowly beside the grave and spoke in a whisper. "You were the last of our fire team, Art, and you kept watch till the end." His voice broke. "Rest easy, brother. We've got the watch now." And with the setting sun bathing the hill in gold, the old Marine stood, squared his shoulders, and walked away. Back in town, beneath Arthur's favorite elm tree, the bench now bore a small plaque that read, "In memory of Arthur Green, Master Gunnery Sergeant, USMC 1934-2025. He never asked for respect, but he earned it. That bench never sat empty for long again. Thank you for walking with us through Arthur Green's story, for every silent veteran, for every act of courage that goes unnoticed, and for every moment where dignity meets cruelty. This was for you. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes in respect, honor, and standing up for what's right. And if you want more stories like this, raw, human, unforgettable, subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment. Your voice matters here. Your support helps these stories live on. Semper Fi, always faithful, always remembered.